How we doing? All right, good to see you. This is week 3 of the Family Feud, and we're so glad that you guys are here. And I'm going to dive right into this series. We've been talking about conflict. We've been talking about how to kind of disposition yourself, your heart, your mind towards conflict. And over the past couple of weeks, we've got into some really great stuff. So if you haven't been with us online or in here and you haven't checked out the series, I want you to go back and watch week 1 and week 2. This is a series that will really help you in a lot of different ways with how to handle conflict and how to have healthy conflict. We've heard a lot of great feedback from this series, that it's a game changer for a lot of different people. And so we hope that that continues today. But the recap for the past 2 weeks is the first week of the series, we said conflict with others comes from conflict with yourself. And we talked about how when we have conflict, actually the reason that we actually engage in that with other people is because there's something going on inside of us, something that we want. The brother of Jesus says, why are there fights and quarrels among you? Because there's certain things you want that you can't have. And so our desires can get twisted inside, and then those things pour out into conflict with others. And so we started to unpack this idea of we have certain wants or desires, and those lead to conflict. That's what can lead to conflict. And so if we kind of move towards God fulfilling our desires, He becomes our shepherd, and conflict can go away. And we unpack that a little further in week 2, in that we fight because we expect more out of people and less out of God. We actually, once we realize that it has to do with us, it has to do with our desires and what we're going through, for some reason, we think that other people are supposed to solve that in us. And actually, if we were to go to God to be the solution for whatever's going on inside of us, then our conflict inside would start to minimize, and our conflict with others would start to minimize. And we talked a lot about that last week. And if God is truly the author and perfecter of our faith, and if He is spiritual in the sense that He can do things that we don't see and things that are going on in kind of our inner world, then we should be going to God to ask Him to help us. And I'm going to talk a lot more about that next week, and you don't want to miss it. I'm really going to unpack kind of the process that we all need to go through, and honestly how we need to help each other go through getting ready for conflict. So today I want to kind of teach us a little bit about what I think the greatest way to actually have conflict. So this is maybe the way to disposition yourself to have a great conflict, or to move towards conflict in a healthy way. And then I think there's some skills that come along with it once we figure out the heart of it. So today is a little bit active conflict. How do we have good conflict? And then next week I want to talk about how we kind of get ahead of conflict, how we make sure it doesn't happen, how we're proactive. And so you don't want to miss that either. And again, there's a bunch of stuff out there on conflict. A lot. There's a lot that you can learn. There's a lot that you can see. There's a lot that I could teach. And so this series, I've kind of gone inward a little more than the tactical, than the actual, how to have healthy conflict, how to, be quick to listen, slow to speak. And those are really important things, but I've tried to back up a little bit further to what's going on inside of you and what's going on emotionally for you, because I think that all of those things are great when we learn how to have conflict, and the scriptures tell us that we need to actually go have conflict at times. All that is great, and that's important, but I think that if we kind of get to the heart of conflict, then some of those behavioral changes, those make more sense. And so that's what I'm doing with this series, and I hope that it's really helpful. One of the things that we do at 514 Church on a staff level is we have a list of about 10 values that we have even graphics for, and things that we say. And these things are what we might call axioms. And axioms are things that really define the culture of our staff. And they're things that we actually say. They're not just things that we sat down and we said, hey, what do we want our culture to be like as a church staff? And then write them down and then start to do them. They're things that after a couple years, things that I value, things that other people on the staff value, what are things that we say that represent values that we have and how we operate? For an example, one is, let's try it. Let's try it. And that's the idea that we're trying to be a creative team. We're always trying to come up with new things, and people are going to have ideas, and those ideas might scare us. They might not make a whole lot of sense. They might cost more money than we thought or take more time. And so when someone has a new idea, our axiom is, hey, you know what? It's okay to try, because the spirit behind let's try it is it's okay to move forward. It's okay to try things. Even if we fail, it's okay to try it rather than never try it, because you never know what it might do. And so we have that as something that is not just written on a wall, it's actually happening down the hall, and that's why it's written on a wall, is because it's actually going on. We sit in meetings, creative meetings, big ideas come up, and someone says, let's try it. And we go, okay, let's move forward. And that's just one of the things. Another one that we do that fits directly into this series and has affected me greatly in terms of conflict is this one. It's run towards the tension. And run towards the tension is something that I came up with several years ago, and the idea behind run towards the tension is when there's an elephant in the room, when the emperor has no clothes, when there's a conflict, when something's wrong, we're not going to turn away from it. We're not going to be passive about it. We're going to go, we need to bring this up. We need to talk about this. We need to engage in this, because the spirit of run towards the tension is we're going to have a conflict that's going to lead to resolve, and we're all going to move further and faster together. All right, yeah, I love that one too. Was that a clap for run towards the tension? Yeah, there we go, okay. Run towards the tension is something that's been really, really good for us as a team. But at times, because it really is something that we value, run towards the tension has this ability to kind of tip into a direction that can be unhealthy, where it almost feels like in the room there's a desire for conflict. There's like, okay, it's my job to find conflict. It's my job to be collaborative and to nitpick everything. And so run towards the tension can start to actually turn into and feel like we want tension, like someone who is looking for conflict. So some people need to be told, hey, when there's a problem, you got to deal with it. Some people need to be told, hey, when there's a problem, you need to work on how you deal with it, and not overdo it and not go after it. And so running towards the tension is this idea of just like running towards conflict, and it can turn into you or me or our team or our church or your family having this confrontational vibe. And it can turn into something where you know, as a family, it's, hey, we're going to talk about things. We're going to air our dirty laundry. We're going to talk about it. We're going to deal with our stuff. Where, man, it's just constantly conflict, and we're not holding back, and there's no grace. And that's not the heart of running towards the conflict. So recently, when we had a mentor in town, the lead pastor of Oakbrook Church, who is also Carmen Smith, who's on our leadership team's father, he's a pastor, mentor that comes in once a month and spends a whole day with us. And one day he observed our leadership team and some of our staff, and there was a lot of tension. And I honestly don't remember what the issue was, but we were living in that kind of run towards the tension. It's like, we got to bring this up, we got to deal with this. And so the tension was a little bit high. And after he observed for a day, he said, you know, you guys, it's so great that you talk about all these things. It's so great that you deal with your stuff and you talk about it and you're willing, because, man, it's just the process can be so tumultuous and so rigorous and so much friction can take place that it almost feels like it's celebrated. And that was his observation, which, coming from a guy like me, I was totally shocked how anyone could observe me as being confrontational. I mean, can you imagine that? No, thank you for your silence. That means you agree with me. But like I can't imagine like thinking that. And actually, he gave us a word to just change this axiom to one little thing that I think was brilliant and I want to talk about today. And he said, instead of running towards the tension, you should dance towards the tension. Dance towards the tension, which changes the heart of it, doesn't it? It changes the heart. Because when you run towards tension, I mean, that's, I want to fight. We're in this to fight. We're in this to have conflict. We're going to make this right. And even if we have to impose our will, or even if I have to fight with you, we're going to run towards it. But dancing towards conflict is a totally different feel. Just think about the visual. The other day I saw this video of these guys on one of these ridiculous sites fighting. They literally got into an all-out fist fight at a golf hole before they teed off, right? Some dude jumps out, they get out of the golf cart, and two guys are just going at it. You know, it's like embarrassing, it's so bad you can't look away. And then another guy jumped out of a cart and ran up, running towards the conflict to try to break up the fight, but the guy in the fight that saw him didn't know it, so he just popped him in the face. So then he comes back and you realize, he's like, dude, stop, I'm trying to break you guys up. Now imagine how different it would have been if he would have danced towards the conflict. I mean, it would have been funny, right? So the first take is, the second take is, he's going, you know, he's like doing the loser dance. I mean, whatever, like he starts flossing towards the tension, or he starts spinning around. Like the dude would be like going at him and be like, why is Ed dancing? And it would stop. He moves towards the tension. If he came up and he did a pirouette, he wouldn't punch him. He'd be like, what are you doing? He'd be like, please stop fighting. It changes everything. It changes everything, right? If your attitude towards conflict changes, the conflict changes. And so dancing is actually an invitation to connect, right? We see this at weddings, right? Running towards conflict doesn't really work. Hey, I want to dance. You want to dance? Do you want to make me dance? Last night I was at a wedding. Certain people walking around, I don't really want to dance. You want to dance? I don't want to dance. We need to dance. It's a wedding. That doesn't work. Here's what works. An invitation to connect is dancing. You ever see those couples that really, really know how to dance? And it's like, whoa. And you're like, man, this person understands how to connect. And you see those couples that think they know how to dance, they're like, hey, baby, come on out. And then they go out on the dance floor, and they're like, oh, Lord, look away. You can't not look because it's so bad. But then you see the older guy, that grabs his wife. He goes, sweetie, come on. He walks out. He spins her around. He dips her. And you're like, whoa. He not only invited her to dance, he's connecting with her. He knows what this looks like. I believe, man, I'm getting lots of claps today. This is awesome. I believe that when your heart towards conflict is like a dance, that you actually want to connect, that changes everything. Running towards the conflict says, I'm not in this for the right reason. Dancing toward the conflict is the heart of, I actually don't want to make this work. I want to make us better. And dancing says that. So conflict, especially when we dance towards it, is an opportunity to connect. It's an opportunity to connect. If your heart is, I actually want to increase what this is, then it's an opportunity to connect. And that's why there's two qualifiers that conflict actually has to have in order for it to be an opportunity to connect. Conflict is an opportunity to connect if your goal is to relate, restore, and revitalize. If you are moving towards someone and your goal is to actually improve the quality of the future, then that's dancing. And that will change your disposition. That will change the way you run towards it. You dance towards it because you go, I want to resolve and move forward and play golf. I want to resolve and dance and have a nice time. I want to dance towards this because I care so much about the two of us coming together and making this better and fixing our relationship. And as a business, making better decisions. And as a team, winning more games. And as a family, having more peace and more calm and being kind to one another. That's what dancing towards conflict can look like if your goal in conflict is to restore. I want to make this better. But see, most people run or dance towards conflict with the opposite goal. Most people go towards conflict to win the fight. I mean, how many of us have actually gone into our own little strategic session about the fight, the conflict we were going to have, and in your mind, and some of us got as crazy as we actually make a list of the 4 things we're going to say. But most of us just do this kind of, we go through the conversation in our head. Well, if he says this, then I'm going to say that. He hasn't heard me say that before. And then when he responds, I'm going to turn and pivot and put my hand on my hip. And then I'm going to walk out the door, and when he calls me, I'm going to deny his phone call 4 times. So when he thinks I'm going to leave, then I'll answer. And then I'll tell him my point. See, most people in conflict, the knee-jerk reaction is, I'm in a conflict, I'm defending myself, I have to win. I need to win this conflict, so I need to think about what I'm gonna say, what I'm not gonna say, how I'm right and they're wrong, and the whole time, what you're doing is you're spending your energy in your head, in your emotions, what you think, what you feel, and you are going to build a case and win. And how many times have you gone towards a conflict, maybe with your spouse, maybe with a friend, and just walked in and just wham, just told them all the ways they were wrong, and the conflict resolved and moved into the relationship getting better? It just doesn't happen, does it? If someone comes and tells you 15 different ways that you're wrong, you just go, well, I guess we can't relate. I guess this isn't gonna work because I'm wrong and you're right, and that's all there is to it. And I mean, that's where it goes. And, oh, I guess you're just always right. You're never wrong. So when you really want to restore the relationship, if your goal is to be right, it will actually never, ever go well. Conflict will always go wrong if your goal is to be right. Your goal can't be information. Your goal can't be to defend yourself. Your goal, if you really want to dance and you really want to restore, is the relationship. It's relating. It's building and making it better. It's resolving. And so your disposition towards conflict has to change. A proverb says it this way. This is what one of the kings in the Old Testament, kings of Israel, said. He says, starting a quarrel is like breaching a dam. So drop the matter before a dispute breaks out. You see, when you move into a conflict to be right, usually what it does, instead of resolving the tension, is it cracks open a wall, and now they come back at you. Because if you start on the offensive, they start on the offensive, and now you're just going at it, and there's just this huge conflict, and you said that, I can't believe you said that. It just goes. But wise people understand that if you go into a quarrel and you attack, all it does is make things worse. And so this king says, it's actually better for you if you have the fortitude, if you have the emotional stability to drop the issue altogether. To just drop it and let it go. So, conflict is an opportunity to connect if your goal is to resolve. And the second thing is if you know the right answer. If you know the right answer. So you're going to go into a conflict and you're going to hear something. And if you know how to respond to conflict, then there is a way that your response or the way you engage or the way you interact can always lead to growing and restoring and revitalizing the relationship. So another proverb says it this way. It says, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. There's so much wisdom and depth in this passage right here. How you respond to someone determines how someone will respond to you. A gentle answer turns away wrath, right? So if I am in a conflict with someone and I come hard at them, they're going to come back at me. Whoa. If I hit hard, Newton's third law, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. This is what this king, this totally wise man of God says, hey, you go hard at someone, they're going to come back at you. You go harsh with someone, you attack, you move in to be right, you give an answer that is harsh, they are going to give you an answer that is harsh. And so, what he's saying is if there are ways that we know we can get a harsh answer all the time, then if we give a gentle answer, the conflict starts to go away. We go hard, it comes back. We go soft, the conflict starts to go away. So I believe that there are all kinds, this is great wisdom, all kinds of gentle answers. Ways to listen, active listening, being kind, being patient. Scripture talks about having your words be seasoned with salt, being quick to listen and slow to speak. To understand there's so many different gentle answers that are not harsh. And that can kind of take the tension and bring it down. But I have a bold statement to make, and I want to share this with you, and this is where I'm going to land us today, is I actually believe that in terms of the answer in conflict, there is one answer. There's one answer that is always right and always leads towards resolution. So you might be good at active listening, and that's good. You should do that. And you might be good at making sure that what you say back is tempered and patient and calm. That's good. But I actually believe that there's one thing that every time you do it will always help your conflict. It will always make the relationship move closer together and not further apart. It will always make the dialogue more fruitful. It will always bring the relationship closer together and give it a better future. One answer. And I believe that if you get this, that if you understand this in terms of conflict, that it will revolutionize the way you interact with people. It will revolutionize the way you act with people. And so you guys can come back next week and I'll tell you what it is. Here's what it is. Empathy. One answer that always moves your relationship in the right direction. Other ones are good. This one is perfect. It can't go wrong. It is the most soft, gentle answer you could ever give. It makes you a sponge. It makes you absorb conflict. It makes you absorb an attack. You become a receptacle for what someone is going through. And even if they hit you hard, if you remain sponge, sensitive to them, I almost said sponge-worthy. Man, that's a Seinfeld reference. That's not okay. Wow, I just slipped into that. Hey, everybody online. Woo, you guys don't even know what that is. Raise your hand if you know Seinfeld. Okay, good. Not enough. All right, I'll move on. Empathy. Empathy is the answer. Empathy is the answer. Now, most people, when they think of empathy, they think of another word that gets misconstrued and is defined, I think, so often inaccurately. A lot of people think of sympathy. There's a huge difference between empathy and sympathy. In fact, great thinkers, writers, psychologists have written about this over and over again. One that's out there right now who's really great is Brené Brown, and she actually says that empathy leads to connection with people, and sympathy is actually leads to disconnection with people. It leads to actually moving away from people. And you think to yourself, what is wrong with sympathy? How can sympathy be bad? That's the way my mind goes. Wait a minute. It's not bad when someone is in tragedy to be sympathetic, to send them a sympathy card. It's not a bad thing. I would argue it's not a bad thing, but it is not the thing that is going to resolve the conflict. It's not the thing that's going to actually help the person who's on the other side of you feel different and start to move towards change. Sympathy is kind of like saying, I see what you see. We just all saw that together. Like we all watch a plane in the sky. I see it, you see it. We all see the car wreck. I saw it, you saw it. Empathy is a totally different thing. Actually, the root words in these two words is the same thing, but the prefix is what makes them very different. And in that definition, we see how this all relates and how it can make such a huge difference. For sympathy, the root word that is the same in both of these is the word pathos. It's a Greek word, and it means suffering. And the prefix on sympathy is the word with. And so the idea is that you are suffering with. And the idea is you see the same thing. We all experience the same pain. Or you see someone's pain and you acknowledge it. That's suffering. I see your suffering. I acknowledge your suffering. And so many of us are going, well, that sounds good. Now take that to conflict. When someone is in conflict with you, to just simply go, I understand what you're saying, is decent. But it doesn't actually move us towards resolving the issue and solving the problem between us. In fact, it's the next one. It's empathy, same root word suffering, but the prefix is within suffering. And so the idea of empathy is an emotional connection. Empathy means to connect emotionally. And it's the beginning of solving conflict in relationships. It makes a lot of sense when we talk about someone who's going through tragedy. To actually sit with someone in their pain, to suffer, not just to say, I see how you feel and I know why you feel that way, but to say, I feel what you feel. You see, sympathy is a response. Here's a card. I hope you get well. That must be hard. I'm so sorry that you're going through that. It's a sympathy card. But empathy is not just a response. It is a way to relate. You see, people need to relate. Not for you to respond. They need you to actually connect with them. And when you think about tragedy, this is very difficult to do. When you think about conflict, it becomes exponentially more difficult. It is very difficult to sit on the other side of someone who you are in conflict with. They're upset with you. And just to acknowledge their pain is one thing, but to actually feel it and to let them know you feel it and to sit with them in it is a totally different thing. And it's extremely difficult for us to be empathetic because it takes vulnerability. You see, for us to connect with other people, we have to actually be in touch with our pain. We have to have gone through something that feels somewhat similar, and then we have to take that similar pain and go, I am actually feeling, I am suffering with you. I am in this with you. I am not just acknowledging your pain. You see, sympathy says this. It says, I feel my pain. I feel my pain. And so when someone is going through something, or when you're talking to someone in a conflict, I feel pain. I feel pain. But empathy says this, I feel your pain. Classic definitions and descriptions of empathy are actually getting in someone else's shoes. The ability to do that. The ability to sit with someone and be like, I am feeling what you feel. I understand why you feel that way, and I have felt that way before. You see, sympathy will use phrases like this, and it ultimately leads to disconnection, at least. So someone gets in, fails a class, and you go, well, at least you passed the other ones. You're trying to show them something good. You're trying to remind them, someone goes through a tragedy, and they go, well, at least you still have your health. At least it's this silver lining idea that tries to go around and say, hey, at least this, at least this. Now take that into conflict, and it gets really, really bad. Someone tries to explain to you, when you say that, that really hurts me. Well, at least I didn't say that other thing. Silver lining. Okay, I understand. That's fine. You didn't do that. We're not talking about that. We're talking about this. When you told me you were going to go pick that thing up or you were going to get that task accomplished, I expected you to do that. Yeah, well, I didn't do that, but at least I did this, and at least I did this, and at least I did this. At least is sympathy. Hey, I understand you're going through something, but I'm going through something too. I feel my pain. Empathy is totally different. When someone says, I'm hurting, when someone says, I feel broken, I feel something wrong, or I wish you would have done this, empathy goes, I'm going to move away from how I feel. And I'm just going to look at them and say this, I'm so glad you told me. I'm so glad you told me. I'm not defensive. I don't have any, I understand. You see, one of the things that I've talked about in a series before is this idea of feelings. The idea of feelings. Sometimes someone comes home from something, maybe your kid comes home, they don't make the team. They feel sad. Parents can go, you shouldn't feel sad. Don't feel sad. You made the other team, and you're still a good kid, and you think that's good, but what you're doing is you're saying, you shouldn't feel what you're feeling. You shouldn't feel that way, when actually, if a kid doesn't make a team, they feel defeated, they feel sad. They don't need you to tell them that they shouldn't feel that way. They need you to understand why they feel that way. This is something that we learn as we go, and it's something that I'm still learning. We learn this with our kids, right? When a kid falls down, it's classic for you to go, oh, stand up, that doesn't hurt that bad. Oh, you're fine, your knee's fine, you're good, you're this, you're that. Instead of going, you fell down, oh my gosh, that really hurts. I fell down one time too, look at my scar. One time my kid did this. They were so hurt by something, they fell. And literally, I just was like, oh my gosh, that hurts so bad, come over here. And they ran over to me. I said, that hurts, doesn't it? That hurts, doesn't it? It just hurts you when you fall. I felt that too. And yeah, they cried. 1 minute later, they run off and play. They just want someone to feel their pain. In conflict, it's exactly the same way. When someone is in conflict, and this is difficult to do when they have conflict with you, but if you can move aside, move away from sympathy, and move into empathy, what are you really feeling? I want to feel it with you. I want to join you. I want to suffer with you. And then someone goes, oh, I feel understood. So I've said before, feelings are never wrong. Your feelings may be the result of a lie. And that's where we mess up as parents, as spouses, is that someone feels something that they shouldn't feel if they knew the truth. But that doesn't mean their feelings are wrong. That means they're hearing something and they're expressing what they feel. So we have to go, why are you feeling that way? And then work backwards at the right time to help them. Our job is not to just fix it. Our job is to feel it. And so Jesus is ultimately the person who does this better than anyone else. There's a passage in the scriptures that says that we have this great, wonderful high priest who can empathize with us. You should go unpack that passage in Hebrews because it's amazing that Jesus is God and he actually is within the suffering with you. No other God can make that claim. And when you know him, you can move closer to him and you can understand that he doesn't just try to solve all your problems and say, at least. He goes, I feel. And when he was on earth, he exhibited that in a story that I'm going to close with. In John chapter 11 in the New Testament, the fourth gospel, we see a story of Jesus and probably one of his closest friends, at least someone he loved a lot. He died, and he learned that he died because his two sisters told him, and then he stayed away. He stayed away from where he was buried for 4 days. He shows up 4 days after Lazarus is dead. And in the story in John 11, you may have heard this before, Martha comes running out and she starts to share her feelings. And Jesus basically just explains that he's the resurrection and that great things are going to happen because Martha's like, I know you can raise him up. I do believe these things. And so he's like kind of sitting in that with her. And then she leaves and Mary, who is mourning, is back in town and Jesus is still outside of the town. Martha goes and tells Mary, you could go out. And Mary runs out. Not his mother, Mary, a friend. And Mary runs out to the side of this town, to the edge of the town. And she falls down. And she starts crying. And she is just asking Jesus to fix this thing and to make it better. And if he was who he says he was, then he could have fixed it. And so the story picks up in John 11:33. It says this, Lord, this is Mary, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And ultimately, what she does is she goes, I wanted you to fix this. I wish you could fix this. And Jesus answers. And he does exactly what most of us won't do, even though he can fix it. Jesus can fix it, and Jesus has showed up to fix it. But instead of fixing it first, he does something that we all need to learn to start to do. He does this. It says, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Wait a minute. Jesus knows. Think about this passage. He knows he's going to raise Lazarus from the dead. He knows he's the resurrection and the life. He just called himself that. But he doesn't talk about what he can do. He doesn't talk about he doesn't at least I'm the resurrection and the life. At least I can fix it. At least I can solve all your problems. Hey, at least I showed up. I am God. I left my throne for you. No, he looks at Mary and he looks at the Jews who are crying and he starts to suffer with them. He's going to solve it. If anyone could come along and be Mr. Fix-It, this was Jesus. This is exactly what no wife wants to hear. You could have fixed this. Well, I'm going to fix it. I want to hear, what do you feel? Do you get this? Do you feel me? And Jesus starts to be moved. And then it says, where have you laid him? I'm connecting with you. Come and see, Lord. They replied. She takes him to the tomb. And then Jesus walks away weeping. Have you ever thought of this passage this way? Jesus is weeping on the way to resurrect Lazarus. If that's you and me, aren't you going, wait till I'm going to show you what I'm about to do? I'm going to show you I'm going to raise him from the dead. I'm going to fix all of this. Jesus isn't thinking about solving the problem. Jesus is connecting with Martha. He is weeping because she feels pain, so he feels pain. And actually, the author and the writers in this passage view Jesus' weeping as sympathy. They say it. Then the Jews said, see how he loved him. Jesus is not weeping on the way to Lazarus' tomb because he's dead and he knows he's going to resurrect him. He knows he's going to come to life. He's not, oh, I'm so sad that Lazarus died. Oh, I guess I'll have to raise him from the dead. Jesus is weeping because Martha is weeping. He feels her pain. He walks with them to the tomb, feeling their emotion. Imagine this moment connecting. Martha shows up. You should have been here. You should have done it. Jesus sees the tears in her eyes. Instead of, I'm going to raise him from the dead, I'm going to fix it, he weeps. He becomes soft. The reaction, the answer is soft and sweet and gentle. And he moves closer to Martha in weeping about the loss of their brother and friend. And then he says, take me. And they walk together to life. They walk together to resurrection, weeping because Jesus feels what Martha feels. Imagine that moment. Imagine the moment of Jesus walking up to a tomb, weeping, knowing I'm about to blow your mind, but you feel pain, so I feel pain. Conflict is an opportunity to connect. If we dance towards it, if our goal is to resolve it, if our goal is to restore, and it is always going to result in connection when you have the right answer. And the right answer is always empathy. The right answer, my friends, listen, in conflict, the next time you're sitting across from one, the next time you're on the phone, the next time you're texting, the next time you're in the office, the next time, instead of at least say, I'm so glad you told me. I'm so glad to know what you're feeling because my goal is to feel what you feel. The beauty of this is when you feel what the people you love are feeling, then together you can resolve it. When there's safety and connection and love. So this week, could we be like a room, like a church of people that looks at whatever conflict, whatever issue, and instead of trying to solve it, we look at it as an opportunity to connect. To connect. That's what this week of Family Feud is all about. Can I just say a prayer for us? Father, so many of us are living in this world of conflict, and we want to fix it, and we want to fight, and we want to be right. But God, even when you knew the answer and had the answer, and God, you are the answer. You chose connection. You chose to walk with Martha. You chose to cry with Martha. God, thank you so much that you are that kind of a God. That you don't just spit answers at us, and you don't just tell us what we should think or how we should feel, but that when we feel pain, you feel pain. When we feel betrayed, you were betrayed. When we feel empty, you felt empty. When we feel disconnected, you were disconnected. You can empathize with us, and you meet us in our emotion, no matter what it is. Father, I just pray in the name of Jesus that this church would dramatically change, and that the fighting and the conflict that is happening among us, that it would all just radically transform into opportunities to connect. I pray that everybody in this room would dance towards conflict so we can connect with one another and love each other the way you told us to.